Hi, and welcome to a partner series to HERstory on the Rocks podcast, HERstory Top 10, where you will get 10 quick, interesting facts about a woman in history. In this series, I talk about good women, bad women, fictional women, and non-fictional women from all times and places because women have nuance. Today, we are digging deep into female warrior herself, Joan of Arc. One, Joan was born around 1412. She was of Arc, which was an area or a location. People did not traditionally have last names in her time because they were not necessary unless you were extremely famous. Interestingly enough, Joan's mother did have the surname Roma, which typically meant that a person had gone on a pilgrimage to Rome. However, there's no evidence that Joan's mother did that. 2, Joan lived in France during the time of the 100 Years' War, which was primarily between the French and the British. However, there was also a conflict in France regarding who would be crowned king, and that is where Joan gets involved. 3, Joan grew up in a middle-class family and had 3 brothers and 1 sister. When she was 13 years old, she had a vision in her garden. Her first visions were giving her instructions on how to live a life of piety, but they got more extreme as she aged, telling her she needed to stop the siege of Orleans and get the Dauphin crowned king. Wisely, Joan kept her visions a secret, thinking that people would believe she was insane. 4, at age 16, Joan was betrothed to a boy in town. She disagreed with the pairing, and her parents respected her wishes and called the wedding off. The boy's family sued her, but the court ruled in her favor. So she took a vow of chastity for the remainder of her life. 5, when Joan finally began telling people about her visions, it took a while for people in her community to take her seriously. However, when the Burgundians, the opposing French powers, found out that there was a young girl hearing voices about who should be king from God, they felt threatened, and then her people began to listen to what she had to say. 6, she went through weeks of interrogation to find out if she was sane. She was also put through a purity check to find out if she was a liar. They even dressed the Dauphin up in normal clothes to see if Joan could pick out of a crowd the man that God was telling her should be king. She could. 7, Joan was finally allowed to travel with the army, and 10 to 12,000 men showed up to go with her. She put on man's clothing, and they went to Orleans and easily walked inside with no problem and fairly quickly convinced the restless men inside to fight. During the battle, Joan was shot with an arrow, but she left the field for just an hour or two to have the arrow pushed the rest of the way through before going back out. 8, 5 months after she met the Dauphin, he was crowned King of France, but Joan stopped hearing voices. They sent her to fight in Paris anyway. When the army was losing badly, they pulled Joan and the men out of Paris and tried to kick Joan out of the army. They even offered her a settlement, and she made it so that her town would never have to pay taxes again, and they didn't until the French Revolution. 9, Joan was captured by the Burgundians, who tied her up and marched her around like a prize. When the new French king would not pay for her release, the British bought her instead. And again, she was interrogated to see if she was sane. Joan was in a general prison, not a religious prison like she should have been, and she was chained to the wall. She was denied food and even her male clothing to get her to recant her statements. And when she finally did, they found her guilty of lying and dressing like a man. 10, Joan was sentenced to death, and she begged to have her head cut off, but they wanted to burn her at the stake. In many burnings, the executioner could give mercy to the victim once the smoke rose up and covered their face, but he was forbidden to give Joan mercy during this killing. Someone in the crowd had given her a small wooden cross to hold as she died. Joan called out for Jesus before she died at 19 years old. This has been another episode of HERstory Top 10, providing you with 10 quick, interesting facts about a famous woman from history. Don't forget to like and subscribe below and leave a comment about who you would like to learn more about. If you want to know more about the life of Joan of Arc, you can find it on our podcast, HERstory on the Rocks, on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. And, as we like to say, well-behaved women rarely make history.